The boardroom fell silent when the heavy oak door creaked open during the most critical presentation of the year. Thomas Richardson froze mid-sentence as his 5-year-old daughter Emma burst through the entrance with tears streaming down her flushed cheeks. His executive team exchanged uncomfortable glances, while the potential investors shifted in their leather chairs. Thomas had built his reputation on being the youngest self-made CEO in the tech industry, and this moment threatened everything he had worked toward. But when Emma's small voice cracked with desperation, saying, "Daddy, she needs help," right now something deeper than professional ambition stirred in his chest. Thomas had spent the last 3 years rebuilding his life after losing his wife Sarah to cancer. Those dark months had taught him that success meant nothing without the people you love, but the pressure to provide for Emma often pulled him away from the very promise he made at Sarah's bedside. He vowed to always be present for their daughter, to never let ambition blind him to what truly mattered. Yet here he was in a glass tower negotiating deals that would determine whether hundreds of employees kept their jobs while his little girl stood trembling in a room full of strangers. He knelt down, immediately ignoring the eyes boring into his back. "Emma, what's wrong, sweetheart?" he asked, gently brushing away her tears. She grabbed his hand with both of hers and pulled urgently. "There's a lady outside and she's crying and she has a baby, and nobody is helping her, Daddy. Please, you have to help her." The words tumbled out in a breathless rush, as only a child's words can, when something feels terribly wrong in their world. Thomas glanced back at the investors who sat stone-faced, measuring his next move. This deal represented 18 months of negotiations and would secure funding for the technology that could revolutionize healthcare accessibility in rural communities. Walking out now might cost everything. His CFO Margaret cleared her throat, a warning disguised as a cough. But Emma's grip tightened and he saw Sarah in her determined eyes, that same fierce compassion that had made him fall in. "Love all those years ago. I'm sorry, everyone. But I need to step out for a moment," Thomas said, standing up. One of the investors, a silver-haired man named Robert Chen, leaned back with crossed arms. "Mr. Richardson, we've flown in from 3 different countries for this meeting." Thomas met his gaze steadily. "I understand, sir, and I apologize, but my daughter says someone needs help, and I taught her that when someone needs help, we don't check our calendars first." Took Emma's hand and walked out, leaving behind shocked silence. His assistant Jennifer jumped up from her desk as they passed, but Thomas barely noticed. Emma led him through the pristine lobby, with its marble floors and modern art that cost more than most people's homes, until they reached the sidewalk. Outside, there beneath the shade of the building, sat a young woman who couldn't have been more than 25. She held an infant against her chest while a toddler clung to her leg, and a small suitcase sat beside them, looking worn and weathered. Her eyes were red and swollen, and she rocked slowly back and forth as if the motion itself might solve the impossible situation she found herself in. Thomas approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Excuse me, miss, my daughter said you might need some help." The woman looked up with a mixture of shame and desperation. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bother anyone. I was just resting for a minute before I figured out where to go next." Emma squeezed Thomas's hand. "See, Daddy, I told you she needs help." Thomas crouched down to the woman's level. "I'm Thomas and this is Emma. What's your name?" The woman hesitated, then whispered, "I'm Rachel, and this is baby Michael and my son Jacob." Her voice carried the exhaustion of someone who had been running on empty for far too long. "Can you tell me what's happening?" Rachel, Thomas asked gently. She took a shaky breath. "I left my husband 3 days ago. He was hurting us and I couldn't stay anymore. I thought I could go to my sister's place in Pennsylvania, but when I got to the bus station this morning, I realized I miscounted the money, and I'm $40 short for tickets. I called my sister, but her phone is disconnected, and I don't know anyone else in this city, and the shelters are full, and I just don't know what to do anymore." Tears spilled down her cheeks as baby Michael began to fuss. The toddler Jacob buried his face in his mother's shoulder. Thomas felt his heart crack open the way it had when Emma was born, when he first understood the terrifying vulnerability of loving someone so completely. He thought about Sarah and how she would have already wrapped this family in her arms, already been making phone calls, already been solving problems, before anyone else even finished processing the situation. "Okay, Rachel, here's what we're going to do," Thomas said with quiet certainty. First, we're going to get you and your children somewhere safe and warm. Then we're going to make sure you have food and whatever else you need. And we're going to get you to Pennsylvania to your sister." Rachel shook her head. "I can't accept charity. I just needed a minute to think." Thomas smiled softly. "It's not charity, Rachel. It's people helping people. That's what we're supposed to do for each other." He pulled out his phone and called Jennifer. "I need you to book a suite at the Harbor Hotel for 3 nights under my personal account. Also contact Sarah's place and see if Director Martinez can meet with us today. And call my driver to come around front immediately." Jennifer didn't hesitate despite the chaos he had just left behind in the boardroom. She understood after working with Thomas for 5 years that this was exactly the kind of person he was beneath the suits and spreadsheets. Thomas helped Rachel to her feet and Emma grabbed Jacob's hand, chattering about the cookies in Daddy's office. Within minutes, the car arrived, and Thomas settled the family inside. He called Margaret from the car. "I need you to handle the meeting. Walk them through the projections and the implementation timeline. You know this pitch as well as I do." Margaret was silent for a moment. "Thomas, this could kill the deal." "I know," he replied, "but some things are more important than deals." Over the next few hours, Thomas moved through a whirlwind of phone calls and arrangements. He got Rachel and her children settled at the hotel with clothes and food. He contacted his lawyer to discuss Rachel's options regarding custody and protection orders. He reached out to Director Martinez at Sarah's place, the women's shelter his company had helped fund, and they agreed to provide ongoing support and counseling. Most importantly, he tracked down Rachel's sister in Pennsylvania and learned her phone had been shut off due to unpaid bills, but she desperately wanted Rachel and the kids to come stay with her. Thomas arranged bus tickets for the next morning and made sure Rachel had enough money for the journey and to help her sister get back on her feet. When everything was finally settled, he sat in the hotel lobby with Emma curled up in his lap, fighting sleep after the long, unexpected day. Rachel came down from the room with tears in her eyes again, but this time they were different. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You didn't just help me today, you showed me that there are still good people in this world. You reminded me why I was brave enough to leave." Thomas stood up, shifting Emma in his arms. "You were already brave, Rachel. Sometimes we just need someone to believe in us until we can believe in ourselves again. My wife taught me that." When Thomas finally returned to the office the next morning, he found the boardroom empty except for Margaret, who sat organizing papers. "We lost the deal, didn't we?" Thomas asked quietly. Margaret looked up, and to his surprise, she was smiling. "Actually, we didn't. After you left, Robert Chen told everyone about his own mother who fled a dangerous situation when he was 7 years old. He said a stranger helped them get on a train, and it changed the trajectory of his entire life. He said any CEO who would walk out of a meeting to help someone in need was exactly the kind of person he wanted to invest in, because that's the kind of character that builds companies worth believing in." Thomas felt emotion surge in his chest. Margaret continued, "They want to move forward, but they also want to discuss expanding our community outreach programs. Apparently, your little interruption reminded them why technology matters, because it serves people, not profits." Emma, who had insisted on coming to work with Daddy that morning, peeked around the doorway. "Did we help Rachel, Daddy?" Thomas scooped her up and kissed her forehead. "We sure did, sweetheart. And you know what? You taught everyone an important lesson." Emma looked at him with wide, curious eyes. "What lesson, Daddy?" Thomas carried her to the window overlooking the city where millions of people rushed through their days, with their own struggles and triumphs, and moments of quiet desperation. "You taught us that the most important meetings aren't always in boardrooms," he said softly. "Sometimes they happen on sidewalks when someone has the courage to say another person needs help. You reminded me of something Mommy always believed, that we're not too busy to be kind. We just sometimes forget to pay attention." 3 months later, Thomas received a letter from Pennsylvania. Rachel had found a job and an apartment. Her sister was helping with the children, and they were healing slowly but surely. She enclosed a photo of Jacob and Michael playing in a park with bright smiles that spoke of better days ahead. At the bottom, she had written, "Thank you for seeing us when we were invisible, for stopping when everyone else walked by, and for teaching your daughter that compassion isn't convenient, but it's always necessary." Thomas pinned the photo to his office wall right next to one of Sarah. Every time he looked at it, he remembered that success isn't measured only in quarterly earnings or market share. It's measured in moments when we choose to be human, when we let our carefully constructed schedules fall apart because someone standing right in front of us needs help, when we teach our children through actions, not just words, that kindness is never an interruption. It's the whole point. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is let a 5-year-old interrupt our plans and remind us what actually matters. Because in the end, we're all just people trying to find our way through this complicated world, and the greatest technology we'll ever create isn't found in circuits and code, but in the simple, profound act of one human being reaching out to help another. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Kindify Stories. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that compassion still exists in this world, that small acts of kindness can change entire lives, and that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply stop and pay attention to the person standing right in front of us. Together we can create a world where no one is invisible, where no cry for help goes unanswered, and where love always finds a way to break through even the busiest boardroom. Thank you for listening, and remember, you never know when you might be someone's answered prayer.